Welcome to another episode of the Anabolic Inquiry. Today we have two special guests. I mean, it's always Connor and I, but we have Mr. Leigh Shaw and Tim. How do I say your last name? Because I'm going to butcher it. So
Piatkowski.
yeah, wonderful. Um, let's start off with you, Tim. Can you give us and I because I was saying before we jumped on, I just didn't realize that Lee had done quite a bit of work with you beforehand, helping out and stuff like that. So you guys obviously know each other well. Can you please give us a bit of a rundown around what you do, your history with like PEDs and PED research, and what you're involved in at the moment?
Yeah, easy. So I'm Tim. I'm a steroid researcher. I have a long history, I guess, of being in and around the community. I used to train quite a bit in, we'll call it festival bodybuilding. So making sure I was looking good for stereo. Um,
The
which,
iconic Zizera, right?
yes, of course. Of course, that was the inspiration.
Yeah.
Um, So a bit of that, but also got in there and did some heavy stuff as well. Never competed. It's too busy trying to balance everything else and didn't have the grit to commit to a full prep or anything like that. But it was always, yeah, front and center, I guess, in life. And then sort of went on, did my PhD, looking at very much a social science sort of approach to steroids and steroid harm reduction, and looking at how we might start to tackle safer use. Careful with that word. Safer use, safer
Yeah,
use.
might get
Um,
copyrighted.
You're fine. Yeah.
and So at the moment, mainly, I guess the bigger programs that are run are the steroid checking program out of Queensland or out of Australia now, and Steroid QNECT, which is like a peer-led education phone line where we've got an ex-bodybuilder, Sonia, who takes calls from people, provides safe injecting advice, all those types of things.
So let's
Um,
just let's back up a little bit. Can you talk to
mm,
us about the steroid checking stations that we currently work?
mm. So in Queensland, we're just closed for a bit at the minute. We've got a fully funded steroid checking program. So every Friday from 2 to 6, it was open. You'd come in, drop your steroids off at Bowen Hills Quinn or Burleigh Heads Quinn, and basically drop them off. We cart them off to a university lab,
Mhm.
run them through LCMS testing, and then spit out purity and a presence result. Um, and that's available online. So the basic premise was sort of built on a trial that we did last year, in 2024, where people brought in their samples. You can see it all online. I can send you the link to share with this. But basically,
Okay.
the only difference between last year and this year is now everybody gets a code for every single sample.
Yep.
And you see that code pop up next to the sample, so you can be like, "Ah, that's mine."
Yeah, cool. Very, very cool. And that's also coming to Victoria soon as well, I believe you said. Yeah.
In July, we'll have a fixed site up in Victoria. Victoria, even better than Queensland because we will be using this new military grade paper spray mass spec. So rather than doing off-site testing, everything can be done on the spot. Nobody's ever done it before, so we got a trial and do the same thing that we did in Queensland, where people have to volunteer up samples and we need to go through the whole research process. But essentially, um, instead of like other sort of LCMS systems, PSMS is like you break down the oil or the tablet or whatever drug, you spray it onto a piece of paper, paper goes into the machine, whirls around, ding, 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 results come out within 30 minutes, presence purity. So far
Yeah.
superior than what we've been doing.
Super fast. And the phone line is very, very interesting. Give us a little bit of a rundown on that because it's obviously available now to anyone who might be listening. Give us a little bit of info on what you're doing there.
So if, for example, you about to start using anabolic steroids and you're about to start injecting testosterone and you don't really know what you're doing, you're a little bit unsure, you got a vial off a mate in the gym and he stung you $500 because he's not your mate. But you've got the oil anyway, so you're gonna, have a crack.
I'm just gonna
Um,
say no one's coming to those testing booths and giving you up a $500 vial of testosterone
oh,
either.
brother, if you're paying 500 for a vial, I think you got other issues.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, no, true story. Not me, but I know someone who has.
Oh, it's pretty wild. Yeah, I've
Oh,
heard a few.
brutal.
Yeah.
But essentially, you go and you collect up your sharps and your other things, but you might not know what you're doing. You can either over the phone or over Teams or Zoom talk to our amazing steroid peer educator, Sonia. She'll talk you through how to pin safely and how to do all those things. Likewise, if you haven't been getting your bloods done, you need a website or a supportive GP that's local, provide that. Likewise, if you had a problem, you've had someone treat you, stigmatize you or treat you inappropriately, you can call and we'll advocate on your behalf, and perhaps offer that clinic some training, or some further resources.
Yeah, I think that's like what one, an incredible resource for people. Two, we we're talking about this beforehand. Like people,
Sonia's amazing as well. She's very understanding, very educated. She's a
yeah.
very good educator.
Yeah. I just I think like we were talking about this beforehand, like people sort of forget that now with like not just TRT, but like just gym goers, it's not Connor Lee and I using steroids. Do you know what I mean? It's not like top end athletes who are doing powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongman, CrossFit. It's just kind of like John next door, right? Who goes to the gym 3 or 4 times a week and he's pretty invested in it. Do you know what I mean? That's who's kind of using now, right? But don't really have the same education background or same understanding that maybe some of us do.
Yeah, yeah, next door neighbor for sure. And old love who's just, had two kids and, wants to get the free baby bod back.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, 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 100%. And I also think that like just to preface this conversation and also like what Connor and I do, sort of like when we do our podcast is, and what everything that you're doing is based around is the fact that like people are going to do it. Like people will use performance drugs just like they will use party drugs, just like they will use anything else. We're all adults. We all choose our poison or pick your poison. But if you can do it at least more intelligently, or like you're talking about, like safer use, or at least have a bit better understanding around the mechanisms and the things that you're using, maybe, just maybe, we get less people creating the stigma or less of fucking
Yes.
news stories about people fucking up or going off the fucking rails or having issues occur because they have better understanding and they're using them appropriately and not abusing them as much, right? That's I guess the long-term goal. Education is power, right?
Agreed.
Your background, because you've got a background in trend research. Is that
Yeah.
is that what it was? Like, can you tell me about this?
Doctor of Trend.
Background in
Yeah,
trend.
so talking about safer use.
Um, no, so in 2023 and 2024, I ran a few studies, specifically looking at trend. And this came from, I guess, pushing the trend up myself, at one point and for a long time, and definitely feeling, well, for longer than I should have. So probably about 600 milligrams for 20 weeks. And remembering the the things that happened to my life during that time. I mean,
You're the story.
bench
You're the anecdotal
bench and
story we're
squat was
talking
was
about.
great. It was great. I mean, I was up at a lean 94, 95, benching 180 for reps, squatting
Okay.
260 for reps, deadlifting 260 for reps. It was good. It was,
Truly
good.
ready for 2014 stereo 2 day. Fucking.
Yeah, would have been one of the
Truly.
strongest guys at stereo for sure.
Yeah, look, and but everything else was, falling off, I guess. So really, relationships weren't too good, wasn't focused on actually doing any research, wasn't focusing on work, all those types of things, which we know happens.
Mhm.
So I guess in come 2023, I decided there wasn't any human studies on trends. So I was interviewing people about their experiences and wanted to publish that and put it out there. And so I did. And sort of the first study went up in Drug and Alcohol Review, just representing all those, negative effects that could come alongside trend use. And sort of got it out there. And then in 2024, I ran this mixed methods sort of study. So 30 interviews with people who use Tren all around the world, and a big survey as well. Now, what I wanted there was to present a more balanced account, because I think when we talk about drugs, it's really important not just to say don't do drugs, just like it is important to say don't do Tren. But to, say these are some of the fantastic things that come with using Tren, and these are some of the not so good things, and how do we minimize the not so good things? So the interviews with people who've used it, found this sort of thematically analyzed all of it and found that anywhere under 200 milligrams a week for no more than 4 weeks was sort of the sweet spot for people not to have any of the, we'll call it the bad shit happen, punching holes in drywall, whatever else, versus the good shit. So, lifts going up, lean, vascular, strong, all those kinds of things. The survey, on the other hand, again, used that sort of 200 milligram dosage and ran some multi-level modeling to look at the effects of psychological distress and aggression across a bigger sample, so almost 300 dudes. And of course, as dose went up, verbal aggression also went up significantly. Nothing else, but I think that was an artifact of just needed more people in that survey. But certainly verbal aggression was significant as dose increased. So I think, jury's out on steroids and aggression and violent behaviors. But I think if there's one drug that probably contributes, Tren would be the one that I'd be picking there.
Yeah, super interesting. And what the dosage was, the safer use dosage was considered under, was like under 4 weeks, and under 200 milligrams was essentially like that kind of like cutoff point where people start to notice like either even like a smaller amount for an elongated period of time had impacts, but obviously would be dose dependent still, right? Like as it goes up, it just increases.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think there was some people using as little as they'd tried and tested a few different amounts, and they were down to about 50 milligrams or 25 milligrams a week,
Which is
and they were
actually quite
happy.
common now, right? Like
Yeah,
amongst the bodybuilding, like Connor, you could probably maybe speak more on this, like that micro dosing trend, like a trace kind of like dosage in cycles as opposed to like a primary key driver. Are you seeing a bit more of that?
Yeah, I then started incorporating a little bit more of it myself, to be honest.
Yep.
Personally, I don't handle trend very well anymore. I can deal with it a little bit better when I'm dieting, but if there's high amounts of food involved, it absolutely just destroys my
Okay,
digestion.
so when you say handle, it's just kind of like a digestion and appetite
Yeah,
response.
I'm pretty decent on it. Like I actually did push the trend up for about a week leading into Melbourne just to try and feel back out a little bit after being injured. And I was fine with it then with no food. But
Okay.
the second I try to add trend into a prep where I'm normally eating into a competition, and actually it really lines up with what Tim says. If I'm at a lower dose, I can get about 4 weeks before I start to get really bad. About 4 weeks in, I'm throwing up every day.
Really throwing up. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. And
Leigh,
trend, like I can deal with orals, everything
yeah,
else I'm fine, but trend when it goes in after a couple of weeks, I'm throwing up. Terrible, terrible reflux.
super interesting.
But yeah.
Leigh, do you find is there like a sweet spot? Do you find like I mean you're a pretty calm human being in general, but do you have any like digestion stuff? Like is there any implications for yourself?
No, not digestion wise, but then my appetite's not great at the best of times as it is. So it doesn't really dip any worse. But yeah, I think definitely having like more a calm demeanor, the aggression side probably brings me up to a level that's normal for most people that probably are in the gym training for like life therapy
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
It feels like I'm probably still more calm than some of the guys.
yeah, for sure.
Um, I've definitely had runs of it where sleep was affected, whereas in the past, initially sleep
Mm.
wasn't at all.
Sleep's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, not so much like waking up sweating in the night, but just if I did wake up, I was awake.
Yeah, interrupted sleep, just like or
Yeah,
multiple wakes and stuff
didn't
like
feel
that.
like I was
Right?
really like deep asleep.
Mhm.
And that towards like typically we'd have trend closer to competitions.
Yeah.
When you're beat up, your nervous system's cooked, especially like strength training.
Yeah.
And you start to lose sleep as the weeks go on and you keep it in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like
It's not a
a
good combination.
compounding
100%.
combination. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I do think like, yeah, there is a sweet spot in terms of duration. Which if I've pushed that to 6 or 8 weeks, it's like, okay, I'm still getting a benefit, but the bad things are starting to stack up a
mm.
little bit more where it's like, this probably isn't worth it now.
I mean, yeah,
Especially in strength sports, because when you're just looking to express strength, you're going to get the majority, if not all, of your strength
Yep.
expression improvements from trend within a few weeks. Maybe in
Yeah.
composition sports where you're using it for other reasons, maybe longer durations are warranted. But in strength sport, you're looking to peak on one day. Maybe, if you got a couple of competitions, you might have to strengthen things out. But yeah, I really don't see a use for using it very long in a strength-based situation.
No, I think weight class athletes will probably gear towards that more than
Yep.
NPP or something else as a driver because of like managing their weight better. Also manages their appetite in like unintentionally. But yeah, I think that 4 week mark is kind of a good spot.
you had
And
a
for me,
sorry.
even with those weight class guys, if they are going to use it longer, it'll be like for me, how I would structure it would be that micro dose until we get to that last peaking phase, and then we may push trend up into your more traditional dosing,
Did you look at
dosing
injury risk?
areas.
Did you look at
Right.
injury? Did you look at injury risk as well, or more so just mood dependent sort of stuff?
Different study, different cohort, which is currently under review. But I mean, you know what it's like in powerlifting. I think 17 out of 21 of them were injured, and more than once usually.
So it's hard to define where that's what the mechanism there is, right?
Oh, everybody said it was, heavier weights, more training,
Yeah,
more strain on ligaments and
yeah.
tendons because they
Mm.
weren't keeping up with the growth. I mean, as you start to move out through, if you're at that elite level and you're a weight class athlete, as soon as you start under eating, as soon as you don't have, growth in there, as soon as any little one thing that starts to stifle, I guess, the amount of fluid that's sitting in capsules and tendons, as well as
Mm.
any sort of protective factors that you have, just takes one extra loading phase and things can go pear-shaped.
Yeah, because I mean, Lee had a consult recently. We are talking about this where the coach actually said if athletes did use that particular drug, he would usually basically steer clear of them or like recommend them not, which we found really interesting, right?
Yeah, it was just in terms of it was purely like anecdotal from a lot of his experience over the years where the second someone wanted to try trend or add that in, that's where injuries and tears would start to happen like more frequently.
Well, yeah, which I just found. I just thought it was worth asking because I found that interesting the other day when we were talking about it. I got
I
some
guess you got
questions.
to look at what else is in the mix, right? Like if
Yeah,
you,
and but what would the
that
mechanism of action actually be? Like, how could it possibly? Because all other androgens in some way or another increase collagen production, joint integrity, whether it be to, obviously varying degrees. I just can't see how trend would actually be having a negative impact on things. Obviously, very strong impact on strength, but is it just the strength increase that is causing the injuries, or is there actually something deeper going on that is putting the body in a more prone state to being injured? I just
I
can't think of any reason as to why it would.
I think this is really interesting, and I know in animal models like in zebrafish, we've got genotoxicity happening as soon as you introduce trend metabolites in. Um, and I mean, if you run with that, and our biggest worry is neurotoxicity with trend, right? Emotional impairment, things like that. But I guess we don't know especially in humans, what other gene expression is being altered as soon as we add in something like TrenAce, right? So
Interesting.
and what we can't ethically do, I guess, is jam someone with, you know, a gram and start to slice out bits
Figure
and
out what's going
pieces.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you know, Jack the Ripper probably could, but we are ethical, so you know we're not doing that to anyone. But that would be the interesting stage. And by the time we get a cadaver, I guess, you know, things have shifted and changed. And by the time we figure out, you know, death by steroids is anywhere in the picture, again, it's, you know, too far down the track. So I think the best we've got is animal models to start to look at exactly what's happening. I'd hazard a guess that it's the rapid strength increase alongside confidence and aggression that could be changing the way that people even, you know, fire in the gym, or their level of, I guess, we'll call it motor neuron drive. So I guess
Yeah.
coming in and you know, tackling weights that they probably usually wouldn't, or rep
Yeah,
ranges that they
or
usually
just
wouldn't.
the speed at which you upregulate your ability to create force and get strong and like handle loads. Like I heard a discussion on data the other day, in terms of like a supplement for output for like strength athletes and the increase or the potential anecdotal increase of injury, which I found interesting. And I guess it would be along the same concept in terms of the ability to express or to lift much greater loads, and then obviously causing injury if you're not obviously prepared for it, or it's like happened quite quickly, and like other tissues are not quite adapted to the same sort of level to handle the amount of stress. So I just thought that was interesting. Can we talk a little bit? We will get off trend, but you know what? Like I do think like from a strength sport perspective, that conversation and that particular drug is such a big one because it's such a common drug, and there's such a like big debate all the time around like, do you use it? Don't you use it? Like, how do you use it? Neurotoxicity is probably the biggest one where people go like, that cost is like that juice isn't worth the squeeze. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Like that's what I've seen.
well, again, zebrafish, emotional impairment, forced copulation with other zebrafish, you know, like all these other issues. I will say this: there was a sample in wave three of our checking trial that had no tren in it. It was a test blend instead of tren that probably had some food dye or something in there. Um, or there was a few samples in there that had, you know, well underneath the dose of, you know, as 100 milligrams or whatever, and it had 60 or 50 in there. Now, that'll still do the job, how much of the job, you know, and you never know where you started out. Maybe you started out thinking you were getting 100 milligrams of TrenAce and you were just using, you know, a mil a week or something. You're actually at 50, and then you go and you buy your next batch and suddenly you're at actually at 100, or maybe there's no trend in there, or, you know, whatever else. And that is probably playing a role in terms of injury, in terms of everything else as well, because
Sure.
you don't know precisely what's in there.
Super.
I would even wager that a small part of it would be placebo. So I think there's a lot of people that you could tell are on trend that would just turn into an animal because they think they're on trend.
It definitely likens itself to strength sports athletes. Like they take something, they feel stronger, they go in, especially like strongman. It's not
Yeah,
slow, deliberate powerlifting. Like you pick something up and you run with it.
yeah,
So yeah, if you do that like mindlessly, it's very easy for something to just,
And like increased confidence and stuff like that as well.
definitely.
yeah, people just rip at a sandbag too hard because they're so fired up and then their bicep pops.
Yeah.
What are the risks around the neurotoxicity? Just so lifters, so people listening can understand the neurotoxicity side of stuff. Like people, or like what have the studies shown, or what have you looked at in terms of trend usage and neurotoxicity? And what does that actually mean for people using the drug?
So Zelleroth's the name to look out for in PubMed, and there's been comparisons between in tissue, not in actual brains, looking at nandrolone, stanozolol, and trenbolone, and showing like extreme rapid apoptosis, so cell death occurring as a result of tren significantly outstripping the other drugs. Now, nandrolone's known to be neurotoxic as well, and so other steroids, but I guess nothing to the degree of tren when run comparatively. And then I think the group from Oslo, so from Norway, has looked at doing EEG, like electroencephalography, and other types of fMRI scans, where people have used tren alongside other things and seen significant, as I said, emotional impairment, impairment in long-term memory, impairment in motor neuron firing rates, I guess because of downregulation over time, and things like that. So I guess key take, or what I take away from that is, I guess, it's not so much the cell death that's the problem, like everything's regenerating. I guess that's why the breaks are important, to wash off the stress, right? Because otherwise you just accumulate that more and more and more.
Super interesting. I'm going to go through some of the questions that we got. So, I mean, whoever's got the best answer, or I'll ask all three. The first one, I might skip the first one because the first one literally is why doesn't Victor Black get the recognition for creating the safer use model we all use now? I mean, we
Because
have,
Connor ripped him off.
yeah,
Okay.
because
Sorry.
Connor's an Australian expert.
Look, I'm not an educated person. I came to most of the conclusions that were in that. I mean, look, he's come up with great content. I don't think anyone here is actually saying Victor's put out poor content ever. I'd never really actually heard of his model until I'd been called out by Victor. And then a couple of people sent me his model. I was like, I do agree with a lot of that.
Yeah.
But it's just common sense.
Individuals
It's
come to the same conclusion. I mean, like
anyone. Yeah.
I mean, like I followed Victor Black and Broderick for some time. Do you know what I mean? Like varying or different opinions, but like everyone's just got a different way of doing stuff. It's no, I just don't feel like there's just different ways, right? Basal use or like safer use, varying opinions on what that means, right? Like what is safer use to X person and Y person, right? Like where's that line of the sand? Anyway, the first key question that I have is, do you think it's true that the top guys aren't on as much as you think?
There's such a spectrum.
Yeah.
There's definitely some, yes, and then there's definitely some that are on more than you could even imagine.
Yeah. Some guys,
So-
I don't agree. I think some guys take abhorrent amounts of drugs to get where they are.
I've
Maybe
heard
they don't need to.
7, 8 grams.
Yeah. And then some people probably are just genetically gifted and they just don't need to use that much.
Hyper responders, yeah. Leigh
Yeah.
Priest talks about it all the time. And
Okay, so
just
hyper responders as a thing, so like differing responses to same anabolic loads.
yeah, I definitely think everybody's got, a different capacity to absorb at the androgen receptor site, and different amount of those sites, and will respond differently to different drugs, and all kinds of things. But some people, and they're probably the ones in Olympia that we know of, and then there's the ones that haven't ever touched steroids, so we'll never know. But there's just a group out there that gets the best of the best, with the lowest level of health effects out of it. And you see it in bloods as well. You start someone off on a compound, and then you look at what happens. And I'm not saying bloods are the be all end all, but that's one of the places where they start on a small dose, lifts go through the roof, and then literally nothing happens across 10 weeks. Like there's no change, and you just go, you don't need to take any more. You are golden child. You are going to do really well in the sport.
Look, even on the blood side of things, I see another end of that spectrum where I have probably both my most successful male and female in powerlifting on the 2 of the lowest doses that I have in my crew. However, both of them actually respond fairly poorly on a blood work side. So they get all the good at very low doses, like magnified 3, 4, 5-fold on what a normal person would get. But the blood changes are also magnified negatively at the same kind of magnitude. So they're getting insane results off low doses, but both have pretty reasonable blood skewing at those low doses as well.
Super interesting. Do you find that makes it harder to manage?
Not really. It just ends up being the same. It's just you're using, a lot lower doses, but you're having to manage them as if they were using, more normal, more normal doses.
Interesting. Leigh, thoughts?
That's probably the biggest, like, that changes from person to person, and that probably varies. Like, not even people at the top. I've seen intermediate, essentially like strength athletes in powerlifting, strongman, one taking absolutely nothing, absolutely smashing the other person that's running themselves into the ground.
Yeah.
And then also some people can take the same as like party drugs or alcohol or anything. Some people can take a ridiculous amount of something and not get much return. So the opposite of what Connor's talking about, someone that can take a lot, their bloods probably don't end up that bad, but also at the same time, they probably don't get as much benefit either. So that changes it. Like, we'd know that many people at the top that, like, big guys that take far less, and they're just big, strong guys.
Yeah, I definitely think for a long time in the country, like and I think probably in general, like you look at IPF World, you look at like especially in strongman, like at the top level, here for a long time, like we saw a lot of like very good natural heavyweight men who were just really fucking strong because they're just really fucking strong big humans. 100%. I definitely see it less in the weight classes, but definitely in like the men's heavyweight classes and like even women's open classes. I think like drug-free is much more prevalent in those classes.
Yeah, I think the middleweight men's classes is probably where it's at its highest.
Both in powerlifting and strongman, 100%.
Whereas I think, and the same as like, but even like skill level, ticking every single box, the middleweight classes seem to have that covered, whereas the big, strong guys tend to just be big, strong guys. Their technique isn't always as like dialed in. They're not doing absolutely everything that they could. Which probably includes the drug protocol as well.
100%. The next question I had was interesting one. I'll probably merge two of these together. It's a baseline menu for PEDs for strongman powerlifting, and anything to stay away from. And then I've got another one here. It's like for strength sports, one drug to rule them all kind of thing, which was in the other thing. So, yeah, like obviously there's not the testosterone, right? Like if there's one drug to rule them all, like just take testosterone. Agreed? Like if you're going to have one, it's
Agreed.
probably testosterone, right? It's going to be the biggest impactor for strength performance, but like baseline menu for PEDs for like a strongman or powerlifter, right? Is there anything that you generally would say are like the key things that most people would kind of use if they were doing those sports? And is there anything that you think that like people should just stay away from full stop in those sports?
This is one for Tim, Leigh.
Oh, anyone who wants to go first, go around if you want.
Yeah, go Leigh.
Go first.
Probably like a baseline thing, I guess, probably more strongman than powerlifting because we have to run, breathe, move, have some level
Different
of
requirements, right? Different characteristics from the sports standpoint.
Yeah. So manipulating probably like a base of test and masteron would be probably most common. And then some people would go primo if they've got a bit more money to throw away. Probably things to, I guess, avoid in that sense is things that do make your conditioning worse or do have so much water retention, or you have enough orals that like you get a lower back pump from doing one set of like carry work and you can't actually do the set work to get stronger.
And it might be dependent on the comp. In strongman, it might be dependent on the actual demand of the comp. Do you know what I mean? If you're doing like a static comp, like an Arnold's, which is super heavy for the top guys, like a log dead stone, which is more powerlifting, that might be different to if you've got like a fucking 60-second deadlift. Maybe you don't want to take 150 milligrams of Anadrol or something like that, where you're not going to walk for 3 years afterwards. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's obviously going to be dependent. I think you're 100% right, especially in our sport, because the variables change and the demands or the capacities of the sport change so much, right?
Or it depends what kind of athlete you are too. If you're someone that is fit and fast but have no static strength, then then the drugs that you would pick would probably be to drive up your weak points.
Yeah, sure.
But the opposite, if you're really static, like, yeah, don't walk out breathing heavy and just make
yeah, and like let's like can Winstrol or something like that, which is just gonna like dry out. Like we
Yeah.
just like that's probably like if you're gonna like there's drugs to avoid. It's like we've talked about that on ours, but I mean I think the test of mass is probably like the most common, right, for strength athletes. Like that's probably gonna be your top two. Connor, anything to add on top of that? Anything that you want to like put on top?
Same boat. Personally, I tend to prefer Mastron over Primo for most strength-based stuff, but yeah, the majority of the milligrams for most people are going to be tested mast. Maybe EQ comes in a little bit more in strongman if they are on that kind of less fit, poorer oxygen carrying
Just from like
capacity,
a red blood
but
like,
but yeah, otherwise pretty much the same as you guys have said. It's bread and butter are going to be your stuff that you can be on for a while because progression doesn't take. I think a lot of people get into this thinking that they're going to do a comp prep and just come out the other end this massive different beast. Getting strong takes years, and unfortunately, when you get to a certain level, you're only really going to progress when there are compounds in play. So being able to be on things that you can be on for extended periods of time is what's going to make you a better athlete in the long run.
that's probably a really important thing to touch on, that people think they're just going to jump on their first cycle and just suddenly be like number one. It's like that doesn't work.
How long have you been in sport, Tyson? 15
Yeah,
years?
yeah, 10 years, yeah.
Yeah,
And
10
you know,
years.
like using PEDs for like I'm 33, so
10 years.
12 years, 10 years. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like about that, right? So a long time of continued use. And guess what? Like it didn't happen overnight. I didn't just get magically strong overnight. I was still shit for the first 5 years. Do you know what I mean? And like, and even now, it's like, even with use, do you know what I mean? Like, it's still hard to get strong, and it's hard to get stronger. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't magically change. And one of the biggest things I think people forget, difference between being nutty or using performance drugs, is the flux of strength and how that impacts athletes both mentally and their training outcomes, and also understand that you're probably only going to progress when on. Do you know what I mean? Like you're only like those are the periods where you're actually going to drive your strength up or see those results come up. But one of the hardest things I find managing athletes who do use is exactly what you're talking about, which is like that flux when you are off, that drop. Mood drops, enjoyment drops, training adherence drops. Do you know what I mean? It's like, why the fuck am I training off? Do you know what I mean? Like it's not as fun, right? No one wants to be Clark Kent when you've been Superman for the last 12 weeks. So like there's definitely different things to manage, but it can be really hard, I think. People forget that like, yeah, I think largely people think that that's some magic fix, and then like, oh, if you just jump on, like you're gonna be number one. It's like every like we said, your next door neighbor's using it now. I said like he's not fucking Mr. Olympia. Do you know what I mean? Like, and he's trying. He's trying real hard. You know, like I know a lot of guys who use PEDs and they try real hard, and like they're never going to be number one.
Man, there's a lot of guys that use PEDs and try real hard that you don't even know go to the gym. And like
Yeah.
it's funny, but it's true. Yeah, it's true.
Like the Instagram reels at the moment that are like rate my physique 10 years of gym and PED use, and it's like
Yeah,
everyone's just fucking like railing on.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely feel like that's the case. So, importance of health markers prior to PED use and health markers of concern. Now, I would just like to reference like some of the other anabolic inquiry stuff because we've gone through like health markers for everything, what you should be looking at. I mean, you've talked about this pretty extensively, but like just to broadly go over this, importance of health markers pre and during PED use, Tim.
I think it's not so much where they're at, right? It's where the shift over time, right? So you need to be able to get trends is what's important. Mind you, if you are starting and I don't know, your hematocrit's blown out and your ALT, AST's all over the shop, your EGFR's like under 30, like you probably got other problems, brother. It's, focus on those things. Instead of tipping in more. But I think again, you need to be watching those trends over time. So that's why everyone sort of recommends before, during, after, And then again, later down the track, especially if you want to reassess where hormones are at when you're off. If you're always on something, different story. You're looking at organ health. And I guess if I could flag anything, it's lately, the bloods are great and they're fantastic, but we've seen lots of cases recently where, someone's gone into heart failure because they haven't gotten an echocardiogram. And that's something that has to, I mean, the cardiomyopathy risk from androgens is real. They do grow your heart. Left ventricle can hypertrophy, and you can go into heart failure and die. And if you're not monitoring that across time, and you're just relying on bloods, then you might miss it, and you will end up potentially dead.
Well, we've
So
seen this in some of the popular like Instagram culture with some influencers, right? As of late, like heart attacks being relatively prevalent on PD using social media influencers. I mean, probably always has been the case, but it's just like it's more like when someone just fucking dies, it's kind of very noticeable now, right?
yeah, I think organ screening as well, like
Yeah.
checking liver, kidneys if you can afford it, is always good as well.
Hmm. Connor, health markers in general.
Yeah, pretty much exactly the same. Um, it's probably if they were to look at pre-markers that are just for pre, as I would do one lipoprotein A blood test because it's not changeable. That's a risk factor currently, then unless there's new pharmaceuticals that come out that is just going to be constant. So at least you know whether you're at a higher risk there or not entering. But yeah, same deal if you're cycling off fully, which I don't recommend in most cases, but pre towards the end and then post. I think if you're on constantly, it's probably worth checking both on and off, but just quarterly is generally what I recommend. And then usually if there's any issues in any of those quarterly tests, you may do a follow-up in that area, as you see fit in between. But yeah, if you're a long-term user, I think just having regular intervals of bloods is important. And then obviously the organ imaging, I think, should be done every couple of years for sure as well.
Yeah, interesting. Got some interesting questions in here. I don't know, someone educated or Connor put these in, but they're pretty good. Um, cerebral lysin. Has anyone had any experience with cerebral lysin?
A little bit.
No.
Nah. How to run cerebral lysin properly for long-term training and cognitive benefits. I think this will just be you, Connor. And do you recommend, like, is it something that you think should be in there or like,
Look, I do like it. It's very hard to get now. Um, it would depend on the use. There is some pretty wide ranges of uses, and also the person's budget. I mean, some of the protocols I've seen are up to like 10 milliliters per injection.
yeah, I was gonna say the volume is quite a lot too, right?
It is, but for whatever reason, it's so fucking smooth. You don't feel you can put 5 mils in and you don't notice it. It's
Mm.
really peculiar. But for strongman, probably if it's more of a training related addition rather than just a cognitive kind of mental support thing, probably at the back end of a prep, a more modest, maybe a mil, 1 or 2 mils 3 times a week, just to kind of manage some of that central nervous system fatigue and uh, kind of, yeah, especially if you're someone who's got to be cognitive post training, if you're someone that deals with post training just cloudiness and you're fucked after training, it can be good for kind of keeping your brain at a functioning level. Samax I also quite like for a similar um, outcome, probably not as good, but a lot more accessible and cheaper, and a little bit more acute in action. I think cerebral lysin probably has more long-term benefits. Obviously, actually, with Tren, I would have to do some research on that, but I do believe there is um, some potential benefits for cerebral lysin around Alzheimer's, and obviously Tren contributing to beta amyloid plaques and most likely Alzheimer's itself. There may be some use there for alongside Tren, but it's not something I've done any direct research in and would be able to speak on. But that would be worth looking into, I think.
Hmm. Next one, which is along the same lines, some like reasonably like solid questions. Injectable GHKCU, waste of time from a general recovery standpoint, question mark. You think it's for the money spent, do you think it's a valuable addition to a supplement stack?
Aren't
Someone
you
else want to
paying
go?
like some ridiculous amount per dose? Doesn't it work out as like $130
If
or
you're not,
something?
No, it's
nah, nah,
cheap as
nah.
chips,
No?
cheap as. Yeah,
What am
no,
I
you can pick
thinking
up.
of then?
Don't know. No, GHK. Oh, look. I mean, it's Australia. There, GHK up until there was the recent kind of influx of these Chinese resellers in Australia. Yeah, you did used to pay like $300 for a vial of GHK off
Yeah.
one of those
Even
bougie
even even like
peptide clinics.
BPC and like TB500, I have clients tell me like they're paying like $300 for 10 meals or something like that. And it's
Yeah,
like, brother, do you know what I mean? Like it's a
yeah,
lot of money because they're going to these peptide clinics and stuff. It's just like a lot of money. It's like, yeah, I've got like 5 or 10 mil of like BP. I'm like, well, that's a week. Sick. Like,
yeah,
yeah, like if we're gonna use it properly, like you're gonna need 10 of them. Do you know what I mean? Like, and we're gonna go through it like one a week, you know? So yeah, definitely like the peptide element can be expensive if you're not savvy on like where to get them, right?
yeah. Yeah, look, I
I
think
think
personally, GHK. You go, Tim. You go.
no, you go, you go.
All right. I think GHK, it's relatively affordable. If you've got extra money, it does definitely drive up collagen synthesis pretty well. So do a lot of things that we're taking though. If you've got the extra money, it certainly will have a benefit. I do like it for skin and kind of other reasons, but there is definitely some reason to use it alongside a comp prep or something where you're going through a heavy kind of loading phase where injuries may be more prevalent.
Mm.
Yeah, more of a proactive rather than a reactive sort of
I
approach for
personally
that.
use it year round, but you could definitely, if you were to use it during a prep, I think it could definitely be used in that situation. Yeah.
We had this conversation the other day because I was talking about it, and I was telling my wife about the skin hair nail benefits. And then she Googled it and she was like, what the fuck? Why haven't you told me about this sooner? And I was like, stay out of the fridge. I was like, no, 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 no.
Yeah, wait till she reads up on the growth hormone.
Yeah. She's in tested federation, so I was like, you can't go anywhere near that anyway.
Yeah.
What would the ideal? So if someone was, so this next question was, I cannot afford to get sick. None of us fucking can if you're a busy person. But so far, I use oral vitamin C, glycine, NAC, and intramuscular glutathione. So pretty like serious, do not want to get sick supplementation. Um, if there was anything else, is there anything else that you would recommend that I could use if I cannot get sick? Good one for into comps as well.
Go on, someone else go.
I reckon
Lee.
this is Connor.
Yeah, this is a kind of
Probably all of my like general supplements for like immune support is very basic of like vitamin C,
Yeah, it's that.
NAC.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I
Same
have, I have zinc. I have vitamin D because we're in Victoria as well.
here.
That's like, yeah, very basic.
yeah, probably
I would
5,000
just go.
IUs, vitamin D,
Mm.
vitamin C. A big believer in gut health. So, you know, um, but nothing, spectacularly innovative there,
Nothing fun.
just
Yeah, yeah,
probiotics.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
People,
and
isn't it interesting? It's
Every
like
morning.
good nutrition, some extra supplementation, but like, no, 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 give me the drugs. What drugs can I use?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, nutrition's definitely, I think, definitely always going to be number one for,
Yeah.
I mean, and your environment too, to some degree. Granted that people are probably wanting a drug answer here, so I'll give you a drug answer. Thymosin alpha 1 is probably a good peptide to keep in the fridge as a reactive kind of measurement if you feel like you're getting sick. And you can even use it as like a proactive thing if you're traveling or coming into a company, you just want to upregulate the immune system a little bit to try and make sure you don't get anything. I tend to use the first option. I just keep one sitting in the fridge. And if I feel like I'm starting to get run down, I'll split 5 milligrams across 1 milligram doses that week. And it more often than not tends to knock whatever's coming on its head.
Hmm. Who takes L-carnitine here? Injectable L-carnitine.
Not anymore.
Yeah, one the steroid days. Keep going back to that. um, Carnitine gives me a welt basically every time I pin it. I notice the benefits when I use it, but the motherfucking pit puts me off doing it long term. Solution, supplier issue. What do you think there?
The what is it? Premium subs that do the 600 milligram per mil ones is disgustingly like thick.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was talking about this because like I stopped using it also because it was just a pain in the ass. Like not literally, like it was just annoying. Do you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
just took me a long time when you're already doing like X amount of injections and stuff per week. It was just like an annoyance probably more than anything. So it was just very slow. Like just I'm not a fan.
Yeah. So
It's not hard to make.
No,
Yeah, I
very
was like,
easy,
yeah,
mate.
Yeah, like
yeah, I've heard this. Yeah,
you
yeah.
got an option there. And I've got a few people that take that route at the moment and
Yeah, I
find
make
it
my
a
own
lot
as well.
smoother. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, we've heard this as well, and in like our group, there's a guy who does the same thing, right? Like he's apparently much better. So, always
yeah,
an option as well.
I tend to just, if I was having like BPC or something at that time, I'd have that and draw it out like in that same vial.
Yep.
And that
For
made
us
it
all.
much nicer because it would just kind of like add more water to it. And otherwise the veterinary grade one, which is
Yeah, the equine stuff is very easy, but it's also like 200 milligrams per mil.
Or the other thing you can just do is you just add back water to the 600 milligram per mil and make it
Oh yeah,
400,
I've
and
done
then,
it. Yeah,
then it'll draw up through a sling pin.
interesting. I sort of like that was pretty much the key question. I just wanted to cycle back to because Connor and Tim were on the PED test booth. And obviously, Tim, you've got your checking stations and stuff, so you're kind of privy to a lot of information that like a lot of us wouldn't have. The state of anabolics and underground labs in Australia, quality of drugs that you're seeing, the safety of drugs that you're seeing, like where is it at in general? Are there things that people should be conscious of, careful of, and probably just like a bit of a plug to like test your drugs too, right?
Yeah, look, in the trial, and it's all public, like I make sure all the data as soon as I've got it and have checked it becomes publicly available. So
Is
the
the
whole
lab is the lab under question on those results as well, or just the sample?
yes.
Okay, cool.
All as long as we're given the
Art
like
file.
label, yeah. Then we report it. Some people
Interesting.
obviously, like we've had people, and don't do this ever, but people have come in and thrown like Ziploc bags of just oil with like a scribble on the front, like in the door. Don't can't do anything with that. Don't do that. And same with like tablets, like just a tablet in a bag without any details. If we don't know the weight or we can't get the weight and the other details makes it hard too. But yeah, it's all, I can send you the link and you put
Yeah,
up
I'll
with
pop in
this.
the YouTube link. Yeah.
There's another 150 or so just from this year, 150 different steroid samples that we got in about 5 or 6 weeks that are ready to, they're currently being analyzed. And in the next 4 to 6 weeks, again, I'll put out another report that will give us an idea of the state of 2025 in terms of the market. Yeah, we know with Australian steroid markets, what's happening in Queensland is sometimes pretty reflective of what's happening in other states and territories because we all share similar suppliers, supply chain routes, and raw powder routes. So it's a pretty closely connected network. In the 2024 data, we know that over a quarter of the stuff was unexpected. So if you wanted tren, you got testosterone instead. You wanted NPP, too bad you're getting boldenone. You wanted test C, too bad you're getting nothing, just rosemary oil. 50% of the stuff was underdosed. So you wanted 200 milligrams. Nope, you're getting 60. Stuff like that. 6% was overdosed. So there was a few little interesting ones in there where it could have been mislabeled as well, could have been something else, or you know, genuine error there. What else? Um, I think, the just need more is the idea. The more than I'm able to tell, I guess, trends over time. The brand stuff's tricky because, it's so variable intra-brand as well, and there's all the people that are copying other brands or doing knockoffs and things like that. And then when a brand takes off, there's other people that will jump on that bandwagon and sell you a bunch of peanut oil.
We also talked about this the other day, like Connor and I were talking about, because I had a look through the PED test results, and I went online the other day and had a look at it as well. But talking about the fact that, like, well, a lot of, like you said, the supply route is much the same, right? So the raws are very similar. So everyone might get a batch, and you might have three brands that like kind of use the similar raws, and like they're all fucked. It's like that batch is all kind of like bad. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just the brand is bad; it can just be the batch, like this time period. And we saw that with like some of the other labs that have gone under recently. I mean, like Leigh and I were talking about this a while ago, because one of the labs that we sort of like utilize quite a lot, they sort of went under, and we saw a lot of like PED tests and stuff come out, and it was like they were like one of the very, very common ones where they were significantly underdosed. Do you know what I mean? Or like significantly poor results, but had previously excelled. Do you know what I mean? So very, very hard to understand. And also, what you trust now doesn't mean you should always trust it. So you probably should always test it, right?
Got to keep checking and got to keep. That's why I always try and make sure there's multiple waves released in a year and multiple opportunities where people can drop off and we get a snapshot of the market. It was never meant to be just of benefit to the person. Like, that's fantastic that people get a direct result. But the whole idea was, I guess, as soon as people chip in, because it's a fully funded service, everyone benefits as soon as those results go out there. So you can look through and go, oh, it, it's the start of 2025, and most of the stuff's underdosed across multiple different labs. Like, there must be something happening at the moment.
Super interesting.
I think, yeah, always check, always like test every time you make a purchase. Make those purchases together in a block, I guess, and then it's all around the same time. Check everything and then store. Running a study at the moment looking at degradation over time. So I'll be able to tell you, I guess, in coming months or in the coming year, whether over time we see, whether expiry dates matter essentially,
Yeah.
and what that looks like.
What's your feeling there?
Probably not so much early on. I
Yeah.
think down the line more so. Yeah. And weather doesn't look like it does too much either, like in terms of exposure. Yeah.
What about carrier oils and solvents?
Need to have a closer, like, so the chemist hasn't sent me the actual everything, and hasn't had a look at that. I think, to give you the picture, someone drove around with a bunch of steroids in their car glove box. That was the experiment for a year. So that was the experimental condition. And over time, it looks like, from literally a hallway conversation / Teams conversation, doesn't look like much has happened. But I'll have more details soon. I reckon depending on the oil would matter. I think depending on solvents in there would matter, and I reckon the compound would matter as well.
I'm kind of working on the PED test station. Conversations that you had, looking at some of the in general, like the test results and stuff, thoughts, feelings on like Australia's PEDs, and like how things shape up and how things look.
Yeah, honestly, Tim summed it up pretty well. I think one of the important things to highlight was the fact that there were plenty of labs that were good. Oh shit, nothing in this one. And then, so testing every batch is definitely important. No matter how trusted your guy is, as we've said, it's often not them that are actually trying to shaft you. They've been shafted up the line. They have no idea, and they think they're selling you the correct product, and they just don't know. So I think one of the interesting ones that Tim found was there was some double dosed Halo going around at some point. So I don't know if there are any powerlifting records that were set in that period of time, or
You don't want to hit a fucking gold mine. Yeah.
but yeah, it's just honestly Tim's covered everything pretty well. I was honestly a little bit surprised. Been using for quite some time. Didn't think it was quite as bad as it probably some of the results are showing. I thought, I definitely thought that things were a little bit better than what the results seem to be. So yeah,
Keep your eyes peeled. Well, yeah, I think that's a big one. I mean, like not a fucking giant plug, but like we do have the benefit of having like a pretty good fucking easily accessible means to test, you know what I mean? Which was not the case, you know what I mean? Like it was just trust, and now you can sort of like we are going to be able to drop it off and be able to test thanks to the work that Tim's doing, and we do have PED Test Australia, which is literally just enables you to test it from your home and see whether it's like a worthwhile investment or even just like worth putting in. Right. So like very easily low barrier things that you can do if you are using. So thank you, boys. Thanks for jumping on. Tim, where can we find you if we're looking for you more uh, understanding about your research, things coming up, channels that people can find you?
I'll shoot you through a few links, and if you
Right.
post them up,
Yeah, I'll pop them
yeah.
on the YouTube description and stuff like that too. Connor, you should be able to find Connor on Instagram, through YouTube, through any of our other podcasts that we've recently put out, and Strength Zen for Mr. Leigh Shaw, as per normal. Thanks for tuning in,
and
guys.
Tyson on the strongman way.
Yeah. Yeah. And me, I assume that you found me if you're listening to this. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining. Great conversation. And thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.